this video is going to be so long because I have so many eyeshadow palettes to talk about. Looking at all of my eyeshadow palettes, I realized like how disgusting I keep my makeup because they're like all just disgusting. Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. If it's your first time here and you didn't already, my name is Tarrah and thank you so much for being here. And don't forget, if you like my vibe, don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to hit the notification bell down below so you don't miss out on any of my new videos, especially since my upload schedule is kind of crazy. Today's video, I'm super excited, is a tag video called All About My Eyeshadow Palettes. I'm pretty sure this tag video was created by Samantha March. It was super fun to go through my collection and I learned a lot going through my collection. I have a ton of palettes here. It's kind of insane, I'm not gonna lie. I highly encourage you joining in on this tag because it's super fun. I love going through my collection, especially if we have a large collection. We tend to not really go through our collections that often. We'll leave all of the questions down below in the description box, so if you want to join in on this tag, you can. First question for the tag is to show your newest eyeshadow palette. I embarrassingly have 4 new eyeshadow palettes, so we're just gonna go through and talk about each one. I ordered these all around the same time and they all came in at the same time, so that's why they're all my newest eyeshadow palettes. The first one I want to talk about, which is absolutely dirty already and I haven't even used it, is the Artist Couture Supreme Nudes palette. If you know who Mac Daddy here is on YouTube, then you would know that he released this eyeshadow palette, I want to say a month or 2 ago. It is a basic neutral palette. I honestly don't have that many neutral palettes in my collection. I have more colorful eyeshadows in my eyeshadow collection. I love the tones in here. I feel like this would work on a lot of different skin tones. I felt like I could use this on a lot of different people when I do their makeup for prom, weddings, photo shoots, whatever. One eyeshadow palette that I have played with, Self Love palette by Lubov Cosmetics. Lubov Cosmetics is an indie brand that I found on Instagram many years ago. I have the shade Enlightenment, Amazing, and Goddess in my crease and outer corner today. The shades that I used, I did like the way that they performed. I will say this black isn't one of those super pigmented blacks. It's more of like a gray black that builds. My next newest palette is the ABH Norvina Volume 4 palette. For some reason, I was not drawn to this palette right off, but when I saw swatches of it, I was really intrigued by it. I haven't played with this yet, but I am super excited to play with this. I picked this up along with their new gel liners or cake liners or whatever you call those. Let me know in the comments down below if you would be interested in a video on this palette, even though I know it's not like new anymore. And my last newest palette is the Midas Cosmetics Smokey Glow palette. I actually have a whole video on this palette and the whole collection that Hannah did with Midas Cosmetics coming. If it's already up, I will link it in the description box. I really do like this palette the few times that I've used it. Spoiler alert. I will say it is very easy to get an eye look that is very similar no matter what you do due to the color story in this palette, but I am thoroughly impressed with the quality of the shadows in this palette. The next bullet question is show your oldest palette. And I really had to think long and hard about this, and I also realized that a lot of my eyeshadows, even though they're like older, they're not like old YouTube older. I have decluttered a lot of palettes, but one palette that I've always loved and is my oldest palette in my collection and I haven't decluttered yet is the Anastasia Beverly Hills Modern Renaissance. It really made people go, oh my gosh, who is that brand? I mean, ABH was already really known for their brow products, but this palette really put them on the map, in my opinion. This just has some beautiful warm tones. I love the orange in here. The berry tones in here are beautiful. The shimmers are beautiful. Question number 3 is show your most expensive palette. And when I saw that question, I knew it was gonna be a Jeffree Star palette. I just didn't know which one it was gonna be, but it was indeed the Jeffree Star Jawbreaker palette. This has actually been one of my favorite palettes that I've ever purchased. It was featured in my favorite makeup of 2019. I will link that video down below if you're interested in watching that. I really love all the colors in here. I'm a colorful eyeshadow girl, even though you can't tell that by my eye look today, but I am usually all about color. And I know a lot of people don't like this color story, but I personally love this color story. I've created so many different unique looks with this palette. Some of the shimmers are hit and miss. Some of them are very chunky, but they do perform well. You just have to be really careful for fallout. The neons and pastels in here are super beautiful. They're pigmented, they build well, they blend well. I really love it. And it's kind of sad because due to recent events, well, you guys will hear about it soon because I'm going to make a whole video on it. But This is my most expensive palette. Question number 4 is to show your least expensive palette. I actually have 2 palettes for this. One of the palettes is the Midas Cosmetic Green Tea Macchiato palette, which is so beautiful. I love how simple and cute this is. It's just a 4-pan palette. I have used this. I love the look I created with this. I actually feel like you can get a lot of different unique looks, even though this is only a 4-pan palette. You get 3 mattes, which blend beautifully, and a nice shimmer, which is beautiful. Definitely like what I've tried from Midas Cosmetics so far. Because both of these palettes were the same price, the next palette I have to talk about is the e.l.f. Jkissa Collab. This was her first collab that she did with e.l.f. and I actually really enjoy this palette a lot. I really like the colors in this palette. I really wanted her second palette that she collabed with e.l.f. with, but it's all sold out everywhere. So once it comes in stock, that's coming. This green is really pretty on the inner corner or all over the lid. I will say this purple is a little bit trickier to work with. It's very soft, but it is buildable. I think Jkissa did a really great job for her first collab. Question number 5 is show your everyday palette. Like I said before, I'm usually a girl that's like color is my jam. But if I'm trying to look good for like a job interview or like a family outing, or I'm just going out really quickly and I want to throw something on really quickly, I always hands down reach for the Laura Lee Los Angeles and Nudie Potootie palette. This palette is actually so good. I know Laura Lee gets a lot of hate online because of everything that happened with Dramageddon, but her makeup quality from what I've tried is actually really good, except for those 6-pan palettes that she came out with. Those were awful. I did not like those. They were in BoxyCharm. They were so bad. But this palette is so good. I used to own her other palette too, the cat one or something like that, but I decluttered it. Even though it was good quality, I just didn't use it. This though, I use all the time. You got this nice peach. The mattes are absolutely stunning. You have these beautiful foil shades in here that are like no other. The shimmers are really nice. I just think this is an all-around really great palette. Question number 6 is to show your most colorful palette, and I have 2 for that. I would have to say obviously Jawbreaker, super colorful, and I just talked about how much I love this palette because of how colorful and unique and beautiful it is. But another palette that I have that's super colorful that I love and enjoy thoroughly and have created some amazing looks with is the Lunar Beauty Lysa Drag palette. I really like this palette because you get all your basic colors over here, and then you get all your neutrals over here. This blue right here is like a satin, and then you get these 2 beautiful neutral shimmers. There are, I repeat, there are so many looks that you can create with this palette. I think Lunar Beauty is such an underrated brand. I mean, I know people love Lunar Beauty, but in my opinion, people should love Lunar Beauty the way that people love Jeffree Star Cosmetics. Just saying. Question number 7 is to show your smallest palette. I already talked about 2 of my smaller palettes that I own. So I wanted to talk about 2 other small palettes that are in my collection that I absolutely love. One of them being the SUGARPILL Fun Size Mini Color Palette. First of all, I love the packaging. I guess this palette could have also been in one of my most colorful eyeshadow palettes as well, but you know, there's only so many categories and there's just so much to talk about. I love every single shade in here. Every shade is so unique, and honestly, having this palette makes it easier for me to let go of my Jawbreaker palette after I talk to you guys about what I'm going to talk to you guys about in another video, which is coming soon. So make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on that. The shades blend so well together. They don't get muddy. They don't get gross. I just really love this palette. This is a great all matte colored palette. This is also a really great palette for people that love colorful shades but have a lot of colorful shadows, because these shades are so unique, and that's what I love about SUGARPILL, is because I feel like they just come out with really unique shades. Another small palette that I own that I wanted to talk about and love is the Violet Voss Berry Burst mini size palette. Mine's disgusting. I got this palette in, I believe, an Ipsy Glam Bag Plus or something like that, or a BoxyCharm. And this made me fall in love with Violet Voss shadows, and it made me go out and buy more of her palettes. The Violet Voss shimmers are just out of this world. They're so beautiful. They are a little messy, but they're absolutely beautiful. The mattes blend beautifully. This is a really great go-to palette for me when I want that berry look, but I just want to grab something really quickly, or if I want to travel. If you've been wanting to try out Violet Voss shadows, and you've been scared to try a mini version because sometimes brands' eyeshadow formula changes from their bigger palettes to their mini formula, don't be scared. The mini formula is the same, in my opinion, to her bigger eyeshadow palettes, which are amazing as well. Question number 8 is to show your biggest palette, which would be dun-da-da, Morphe Jaclyn Hill Original palette. This is the only Morphe palette I still own. This is one of the few Morphe items that I actually own in general anymore. I've decluttered a lot of them. One of the reasons that I've held on to this palette is A, because I actually really liked it, and B, because I've used this palette a lot of times to do other people's makeup, because there's so many looks that you can create with this palette. The mattes blend great. The shimmers are really beautiful. I will say, I do feel like there's a lot of shades in this palette that didn't need to be here. There's a lot of repeats, a lot of repeated tones. I've created some really beautiful smoky green eye looks with this bottom row in here that I love. It's so funny to me because I still have the little cardboard that came with this palette because I got this when it dropped. I used to buy literally everything that Jaclyn Hill put her name on, and then I eventually stopped. And I feel like now that I'm getting older, I'm starting to realize that, like, how do I put this? You need to look behind the people and the brands that you're buying things for and who you're supporting. We'll touch more on that. I feel like this big guy is gonna be decluttered sooner than later. I never reach for it anymore. It's kind of like just sitting in my collection, so we'll see. There might be a declutter video in the near future. Let me know in the comments down below if you guys would like to see an eyeshadow palette declutter. Question number 9 is to show your palette with the best memory. I personally don't really have sentimental attachments to any of my palettes, but I have 2 different palettes for this category simply because it's a funny story. The Anastasia Beverly Hills Riviera palette and the Norvina palette, and you'll see why when I open them. Here's Riviera. Oh God. And here is Norvina. Do we see something wrong here? Look at how awful these palettes look. A little backstory, if you're wondering why they look like this, besides the fact that I'm just a pig and I obviously don't care what my eyeshadow palettes look like. My children, specifically my daughter, around Christmas time last year, wanted to be a reindeer for school. And instead of asking mommy if she could paint her as a reindeer or let her use my makeup, which I totally would have been down with. I've always encouraged both of my kids to play with makeup if they want to, as long as I am supervising them. She decided that she was going to come up to my room while I was at work and Daddy was busy doing house chores and play in my makeup. So you can see all the shimmers are literally her little fingerprint, her little fingers digging into my shimmer shadows. There's literally eyeshadow all over my desk now from opening these. I had to close the other one because this one just sheds because the shimmers are so soft in this palette. I do have to say there's still a lot of life in these palettes, so I am going to clean them up, and I do have somebody that I'm going to be sending these to that I already know that will love and appreciate them. I really love the shimmers in the Riviera palette and the Norvina palette, even though they're a very delicate shimmer. I was not super impressed with these brighter colors in the Riviera palette. This purple shade that a lot of people said made them look like they had a black eye, I totally agree with. I feel like if you take out these 2 shades and these 2 shades, it literally just looks like a basic ABH palette. I bought the volume 4 palette that I showed you guys earlier because I felt like that was super close to these 2 palettes mixed together. Question number 10 is to show a palette worth the hype. In my opinion, that palette would be the Colourpop Kathleen Lights So Jaded palette. I know a lot of people love Colourpop, are diehard Colourpop fans. Me personally, I've owned a lot of Colourpop stuff, and I personally don't normally like their eyeshadow palettes or liquid lipsticks. I find a lot of their stuff expires relatively quickly, and I've bought every one of her Colourpop collabs, and I've liked them. They've been nice, but I've decluttered them. I love Kathleen Lights, by the way. When she decided to do this collab with them with the So Jaded palette, I was like, ooh, do I get it? This is around the time that I started being more aware of the things that I was buying. I started not impulse buying or buying just to review things. So I was very skeptical about buying this palette. I ended up buying it, obviously, because I have it right here, and I love this palette. I did a whole video about like full face of Colourpop makeup or testing new Colourpop makeup or something. I'll link it down below where I use this palette. The mattes blend beautifully. The shimmers are beautiful. These pressed glitters in here are amazing. You don't even need a freaking glitter glue for them to stay on, and they stay on all day and are bright, shiny, beautiful. I have hooded eyes. It doesn't transfer crazy. It's just so good. I feel like this palette's so worth the hype. These mustardy colors, beautiful. You have these greens, you have some purples. I feel like everything was covered here. I feel like this color story is beautiful. You have this turquoise. It's just a beautiful overall awesome palette, and I feel like this palette made me more comfortable with decluttering my Morphe Jaclyn Hill palette, because I feel like this is like that palette on steroids. Like, it's just that good. All right, question 11 is a little bit shady, but we're gonna spill some tea right now. Show a palette not worth the hype. I have two for this category, okay? You guys might be kind of surprised. First palette, dun dun dun. Second palette, dun dun dun. Let's talk for a minute, shall we? I have videos on both of these palettes. I will link them down below. Which one should we talk about first? Let's talk about Blood Sugar first, since Blood Sugar is the oldest palette. The packaging I thought was really cool, innovative, different when it came out. As the years went by, I think it's been 2 or 3 years now, I've just realized that it's a pain in the ass. It's a pain in the ass to store. It's heavy. It's like hurting my arm just to hold this damn thing up. Sometimes it gets stuck and it's not easy to open, which I guess the only good thing about that is it's harder for my kids to get into. When this eyeshadow palette dropped, I missed out on the launch. I ended up buying this palette for over $100 on eBay, and it is an actual genuine Jeffree Star palette. Don't worry, I got the whole like receipts and all that other shit. I had to have it for YouTube to review it, and then I bought the palette, and by the time I even had time to film the review or tutorial or whatever I did with it, he already had a restock and I could have bought it. So I had to have this palette so bad because it had all these beautiful red tones. I have hardly ever used this palette. I do think that the reds in here are really pretty. They're beautiful. I have reds in other palettes, and because this packaging is such a pain in the ass to deal with, it's kind of stored in a separate area from all my other palettes, and I just don't reach for it. Now, I have created some absolutely beautiful looks with this that I love, and I've gotten compliments when I've worn this palette. So it's not that the shades are shitty. It's not that the shades are bad or anything like that. It's just something I don't reach for, and I don't feel like the hype was worth it. I also felt that way with Blue Blood. I had Blue Blood, and that would have been in this video as well. But I decluttered Blue Blood because I never used it. I filmed one video and that was it. I don't even think I filmed a video on Blue Blood, but I never used it again. There's so many other indie brands out there that make eyeshadow palettes like this without this shitty packaging that I could be supporting instead of Jeffree Star. I think this palette really put Jeffree that much higher on the map than he already was. I think he knew, like, okay, warm tones are really in, but I want to do something different, and this is what he came up with. I do think the color story is really pretty. The shade Sweetener is very pretty, unique. It's like a pink with like a gold shift in it. But as far as like the mattes, there's nothing unique here. It's just not unique at all. There's not much you can create with this. It's kind of like the same old, same tones. Just lackluster to me now that it's years later, and I'm like, why did I go and fall into the hype of this? Why did I have FOMO so bad that I had to pay over $100 for this? It's just kind of sick, to be honest with you. Okay, now for conspiracy. The packaging I think is a lot cooler than Blood Sugar. I still think that it's a pain in the ass to store. It can be a pain in the ass to open. I have chronic pain issues. It is very hard for me to open these palettes sometimes, and sometimes I can't even open them, which makes me not want to use them. These are heavy palettes, and for somebody that struggles with motor skills and things like that, it can be a pain in the butt. But anyways, let's talk about the actual shades in the palette. If you guys saw my video, which I will link down below, I had my trouble with this palette. I felt like there was a lot of fallout, especially with the shade Food Vibes. The shade Trisha, the shimmer, is just very chunky. A lot of the shimmers in here are very soft, very delicate, very chunky, Fallout Central. They're pretty though. I would have to say out of all of the palettes that I've tried from Jeffree Star, this might be my favorite shimmer formula or metallic formula that he has. Besides Thirsty, those metallics in Thirsty were so bomb. I ended up decluttering that palette though. I just feel like the hype around this was just too much. I fell into the hype obviously because I own it. I bought it on launch day. I was waiting at my freaking phone and computer trying to buy this like a freaking maniac, like a dumbass really. We all fell for the huge ad that Shane Dawson and Jeffree Star had doing the series that they did behind exposing the beauty community or whatever it was. I watched that whole damn series. It made us feel connected, made us feel like we were part of creating a palette, when in reality, all we did was give them a shit ton of money from watching the content that they put out and give them a shit ton of money from purchasing all the products. My lip balm had bumps in it and was gross. I know a lot of people didn't like the color story of this palette, but I think the color story is actually really cool and unique. I think Shane did a really good job with the color story. There are a few shades that I probably wouldn't have in here, like Food Vibes. I feel like this shade is really pretty, but it almost disappears on your eyes. It builds up really nice on the eyes and everything, but then it's like, where'd it go? Where is it? What happened? I do like how they did the different rows where like you have this very basic neutral row, you have more of these bright colors, and then you have like this deeper row. This shade, What's the Tea, looked so awful on me, and I'm very fair skinned, so I couldn't imagine deeper skin tones trying to use some of these shades. Sleep Paralysis, that's probably one of my favorite shades. Illuminati is really pretty. Like I said, I really like the shimmers in here. My rides here, this black is actually a pretty decent black. It's not really the quality overall. Like I said it with Blood Sugar as well. It's just more of, I don't really reach for it. I don't really want to support them either, but I don't think the hype was worth it. I don't see people with different skin tones being able to use half, if not more, of this palette. What's the Tea, Pigmented, Food Vibes, My Pills, Tanacon, Diet Root Beer, all of those are shades that I just don't see working on several other skin tones besides like someone my color. Question number 10 is show your favorite palette from your favorite beauty brand. I have a few palettes for this. I couldn't just pick one favorite. The first one I want to talk about is by Juvia's Place, and it's the Festival palette. This palette to me is just so beautiful, and it's actually funny now that I'm really looking at it, and after looking at Conspiracy, I have very similar tones in this palette that are in Conspiracy, but it just doesn't have those shades that I talked about that I didn't see being good for other skin tones. I really love Juvia's Place because their mattes are really beautiful, their shimmers are really beautiful, their palettes are super affordable. I love that they're really great about working with influencers and smaller influencers. I like that they work with a diverse group of people, which is awesome. I've created so many beautiful eye looks with this palette. I love that you have like these deeper colors in here. You can go kind of soft. This pink right here is so beautiful. It blends out so nice for a very bright pink. I love this really mustardy color, this peach color. You have a nice red in here. You have this nice shimmery white that is absolutely stunning on the inner corner all over the lid. This black shimmer is so freaking beautiful. Oh my goodness. And then you have like this neutral shimmer that you can kind of pair with really anything. It's just such a good palette, and I highly recommend Juvia's Place. Another palette that I love is actually relatively new to me. It's the Melt Cosmetics 420 palette. I really love Melt Cosmetics. I love their vibe, their aesthetic. I like a lot of things that I try from them. This was my favorite Melt Cosmetics eyeshadow palette. I will say, it's not perfect though. I did a whole video on this palette. I'll link it down below. This Shatter shade right here, which is the only shimmer in the palette, I did not like. I do not like. I think it's not the greatest. It's more like an eyeshadow topper. It's very different from Melt's usual shimmer formula. But I will say, the mattes in here are so beautiful. They blend really nicely. They work really nicely. I like them a lot. I like the colors that they chose. I really like that they took it there with the whole weed themed idea. I said this in my video on this palette. Smoke Session feels more like mermaid vibes to me, whereas when I look at this palette, I can see weed theme. If you're into mainly shimmers, this is not for you. I'm gonna tell you point blank. The last palette that I consider to be one of my favorites from one of my favorite brands is the Lunar Beauty Moon Spell palette. The packaging is so beautiful. Like I said before about the Lysa drag palette, I love Lunar Beauty, and I feel like Lunar Beauty should get the hype that Jeffree Star Cosmetics gets because the quality is so good, the packaging is so good. I'm not even a fan of Manny, I just really like his makeup. When we look inside, it's just everything that I would want in an eyeshadow palette. If I'm not wearing color, I am wearing grungy eye makeup like what I'm wearing today. I love purple and green eyeshadows so much, and I've been looking everywhere for that eyeshadow palette that had the right tones of purple, the right tones of green, and this, when I saw it, was exactly what I've been envisioning in my brain for so long that I was hoping somebody would come out with, and I knew I had to have it. I do have a video on this palette. I will link it down below. These purples are beautiful. They're stunning. The mattes blend so well for purples. These shimmer purples are so gorgeous. The shade Prue right here is everything. Everything. I'm not even kidding. Then you got a row of neutrals. And the neutrals are really great. They blend really well. Down here, you have this really beautiful row of greens, and you get different tones of green. I really love this aqua. You have like this brighter green. You have a deeper green. I've like almost hit pan on the shade Samantha, and I don't think I've ever hit pan on any eyeshadow palette that I own. So that's saying something, and this palette is still like newer. Like it's not like a year old, you know? So that's pretty crazy. I love it. Last but not least, number 13, which is show your most used palette. For me, hands down, that would be the Colored Raine Queen of Hearts palette. This palette is so freaking good, and honestly, if I had to choose between Modern Renaissance and the Queen of Hearts palette, I would choose this one. Even though Anastasia's mattes blend really well and the shimmers are really nice, I feel like Colored Raine's palette is just that much better, if that makes sense. Like the mattes are pigmented, but they're not too pigmented. These foils in here and shimmers are so much better than Anastasia's formula. If I'm not using the Nudie Potootie palette as an everyday look, trying out a new palette, I'm reaching for this, for that everyday look or that really smoky, beautiful cranberry warm eye. Everybody, when I want to do their makeup, they always want Anastasia palettes because that's what is really known as Anastasia. But I try to turn people on to Colored Raine. They just have better quality in my opinion. I feel like their palettes are very beginner friendly, but also if you've been doing makeup for a while, you'll enjoy them as well. I feel like Anastasia's palettes can have a learning curve to them and can be a little bit harder for beginners to use. Blending wise, they blend beautifully, effortlessly, which is another reason why I feel like this is a great beginner palette for people. And even though you have like this warm orange and this berry tone, you also have your neutrals. The shimmers in here are really pretty. Dethrone right here is just the most beautiful chocolatey shimmer ever. It's gorgeous. There's a reason why this palette was like out of stock for so long and kept selling out for so long. Let me know in the comments down below if you remember when this palette was like impossible to find and everybody was like reselling it for like $200. It was insane. Such a classic, so good. If you're still here, I appreciate you, and leave me a lipstick emoji down in the comments if you made it this far, because whoo, that was a lot. And that wasn't even all my eyeshadow palettes, you guys. I have too many eyeshadow palettes. Like, it's kind of embarrassing, but I love eyeshadow. I mean, eyeshadow is like one of my favorite things ever. To me, it's like a painter owning different types of paints. If you like this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, or you can give it a thumbs down. That's all fine with me. It's all gravy, baby. At the end of the day, it's all engagement. Don't forget, if you like my vibe, don't forget to subscribe, and I really hope to see you guys on the next one. Bye, guys.